This is Toledo Symphony Lab, a behind-the-scenes look at the world of classical music from WGTE Public Media and your Toledo Symphony. I'm Brad Cresswell. Joining me now by phone are the Toledo Symphony's president and CEO, Zach Vassar, and we also have our music director, Elaine Trudell. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hello, Brad.
Hello.
Thanks for joining me. We've been doing this for some time now because of the coronavirus pandemic. We're all relegated more or less to our homes and talking by phone with each other, but it's been, I think, some fruitful discussions have taken place over the past few weeks. And today we're going to talk about virtuosi or virtuosos, to use the English version. You've got two very spectacular players that are appearing on the TV program this weekend. It's WGTE Presents TSO in HD, happening at 6 o'clock Sunday afternoon. And we're going to talk about the whole concept of virtuosos, but also the two virtuosos in particular that are performing on that concert. That is the violinist Augustin Hadelich and also the pianist Olga Kern. So let's start with you, Elaine, because you were on the podium for these concerts.
He had the best seat in the house, and he wasn't even sitting.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we have a pretty good seat with the close-up cameras, right? Don't forget the conductor cam. We can always see what's going on with you, Elaine.
It's actually the best seat in the house for violin, not the best seat for piano, because you're behind the piano, so you don't hear much.
Oh, okay. Well, talk a little bit about Augustin Hadelich, because I know you had worked with him before. Right? Yeah.
Well, yeah, my relationship with Augustin is very special because Augustin was the soloist the week that I came to conduct, and after a few hours, I noticed there was an audition for this position. So it was the week where I got accepted from the orchestra, from the board, from the staff, as a real possibility to be the artistic leader. So he was the soloist that will accompany that weekend the Dvorak concerto. So for me, it has a very special place in my heart each time I get to perform with Augustin. And also he's very old school, and I can elaborate on that if you want. But he's a very, very old school performer, which I really enjoy.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because a lot of folks, when they think of virtuosos, they think of those old school performers, even more, throwbacks to people like Jascha Heifetz or, people in that vein. How would you characterize Hadelich's playing? You call it old school, but what do you mean by that?
Well, very often when and you just mentioned his name, you think of Heifetz, and you would think of people who play stuff that is, you would ask very often, what's a virtuoso? Also, somebody who plays fast, high, doesn't make any errors. And actually, in my definition of it, is somebody whose technique and understanding of the music transcends everything. You have to transcend technique. You have to transcend all of this. But the reason for that is to make the actual message clearer. How could I say, the musical message clearer. So that's a big job to be able to do that. Very often what we see as a trend in those people is that they have a mind that goes very, very fast. I don't know if any of you have been watching the Michael Jordan, it's supposed to be the Last Dance documentary about a team, but it's basically about Michael Jordan. But you can see how fast he's a virtuoso, right? But it's the beauty of it, it's the ease of it, and how it transcends it. Now, what you do with it is your own choice. But God gives you this gift to transcend and to make the message clear. So when you listen to Beethoven, you get it more as an audience member. If you listen to Rachmaninoff, you're not going like, wow, this is a difficult piece. The minute you think it's a difficult piece is because there's no virtuoso around. You just have to think, wow, this is beautiful. Oh, wow, or how does he do it? It's incredible. But the ease, the mental speed, and the dexterity, how you understand the music, how fast it goes in your mind. It's like chess players who can think at 10, 12 moves in advance with all the different possibilities around it. Yeah. So it's more than dexterity. It's like a real virtuoso is about the message. That's what I mean by old school. It's not just the dexterity. It's the whole package.
So I guess if Augustin Hadelich is sort of the Michael Jordan of violinists, that makes you the Phil Jackson of conductors?
I only wish. but I wouldn't call him at all the Michael Jackson. I would call him something
Michael
like
Jordan. Michael Jackson is a different virtuoso.
Well, actually, I might call him more Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
But no, more like a Magic Johnson. That brings everything together. That brings the music together. That brings the team together. And is an example that you can watch, and it's very positive. So for me, Augustin, it's no disrespect to Michael Jordan. He's the most amazing basketball player ever that will ever be. But it's somebody that talks about the message more than just look at what I can do.
Yeah. Well, I want to ask you more about that relationship between conductor and virtuoso, but let's bring Zach in because, Zach, you've been with the symphony, longer than Alain, not only as CEO, but as, a long-time member of the audience and appreciator of the music and the performances. Maybe talk a little bit about your impressions of this concert, but also you've seen other violinists come and go with the symphony. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Certainly. I'll remember the first time that Augustin came to the orchestra. That was Alain's last time as guest conductor, I should say. The violinists were very excited for his arrival, and more so than other violinists that we had featured that season or previously. And I was curious to know why, and they all talked about his technique. They talked about his sound and his way of playing and expressing himself, and a lot of the things that Alain just said. But there was something that just knocked me sideways when I saw him perform that first time in the Dvorak Violin Concerto. It was the first time in 74 seasons that the Toledo Symphony had performed it. It's not known as this sort of hallmark core repertoire concerto, but he played it as beautifully as if it were one of the great romantic violin concertos that we would put in that category. But more than that, his sound really hit me as if it were old school in a different way, because when I heard it, it sounded like it was coming off of an LP, that there was more depth to the sound than we get from modern performances or modern recordings. So when Alain says that there's this old school technique that he's bringing, I think there's an old school sound as well, and it knocked me sideways. I was very excited when we talked about bringing him back for the performance that we'll see this weekend, because Sibelius's Violin Concerto has always been one of my favorites, and I really wanted to hear what he sounded like in that concerto. And about a month before he appeared in Toledo, I discovered a recording that he had made of the Sibelius, and he did everything that I hoped he would. He stretched out the phrases I hoped he would stretch out. He zoomed through the ones that I wanted him to zoom through, and he had fun with it. So it goes to that idea of not making it sound complicated that Alain was just talking about. So I'm a huge fan of his artwork. But, I do remember seeing Nadia Salerno's Sonnenberg in the mid-'90s with the orchestra, and, I went back into the archives to see what other violinists had performed this work. And the Sibelius has actually been performed quite a few times. It goes back to the early 70s with the orchestra here. A man named Charles Everett was the first violinist to perform it. But then we had one of the Kavafian sisters in the early 80s. We had Joshua Bell perform it in 95. Karen Gomio in early 2000s, and now, of course, Augustin Hadelich. And I think he is just such a crowning performance in that lineage.
Yeah. What was the experience like, Hadelich coming in? I mean, it was his second time with the symphony, right, after the Dvorak, coming in for the Sibelius. How would you describe him as a person, as a professional? What was the relationship there?
Well, it was great because he was happy to be back. We're always happy when we develop these relationships with these musicians who they have such a good experience in Toledo that they remember us more than just one weekend on their performance calendar. They remember the Paris style, they remember the audience, they remember the orchestra. And with Augustin, it was hilarious. I ran into him not at the Paris style, but in the elevator at the Renaissance Hotel. I was coming back from a meeting and up at the Heights, and we were coming down. And a gentleman walks on. It was very, very cold that weekend, and he's wearing something that looks like you go and maybe go snowshoeing in an outfit like this, and one of those big fur hats with the flaps that come down. And he's carrying a violin. So I don't look up. I look down at this violin case. And I'm thinking, oh, a musician. And then I look up, and it's Augustin. So I was so excited to see him, and I reintroduced myself, and he remembered me and just explained how happy he was to be back, and how the Sibelius was such a challenging concerto. He was really excited to dust off his notes and get it ready. Because he had not played it in a little bit of time, probably since that recording was made. And then, Alain, I'll throw it over to you because, I mean, it sounded like, all those notes, of which there are many, were right at hand when he came on for the first rehearsal.
Yeah. Alain, talk a little bit about working with Hadelich on this concerto. And I'm kind of curious about the relationship between, the Phil Jackson and Michael Jordan, the conductor and the soloist. If you can talk a little bit about how is the give and take there? I mean, does he come in knowing exactly what he wants to do, or do you have some kind of input control? Do you work off of him? What is the relationship?
Perhaps it's from my personal experience, which I've been, in how could I say, my first musical life was there was a lot of soloing going around. I was traveling a lot, being a soloist.
As a trombonist, yeah.
Yeah, the trombone, of all things. And enjoyed it very much, except I didn't enjoy so many times concertos with orchestra. And the reason, not because I didn't enjoy playing with orchestra, it's the ultimate thing you can do. It's great. But the conductors never did that great of a job on my concertos. It rarely happened. Well, some of it is because they always want to spend time on their symphony, right? And the concerto is, it's not their thing because they don't shine in it. And, they think they don't shine. But that you see a real conductor to how useful you can be. I mean, if you play Tchaikovsky's Fifth Symphony, every single player in the orchestra not only knows it, but has an opinion about it, knows what everybody else is playing. This is core standard repertoire. When you come in and play concertis, then they need, they need you. The players need you, soloists need you. So actually, it's very important to spend the time with the concertis. So that I do that a lot. I mean, from my sometimes unfortunate experience, I mean, the concerts were always fine. It's just, it's, how could I say? Sometimes it was, I have a very good friend who's principal horn in Kitchener-Waterloo, and he said playing principal horn sometimes is like fun without the enjoyment. So I had many experiences like that with conductors sometimes. I mean, it was fun to play, but I just had to gauge everything throughout the performance because, they're going slower than what we're supposed to do. They say he missed that corner, didn't turn that corner. It's like, how elegantly can you combine that is exactly in tune with what the soloist has in his, in his mind. And especially when you have a virtuoso, we're talking about, they create the clarity of the message. So first of all, it's very important to spend time with the person. This is also old school. Because usually now they fly in, they fly out. But we like to have a soloist and to come in. We have a little rehearsal together. We don't just rehearse the day of. We rehearse before. And we spend some time, and then we redo stuff. And somebody like Augustin is actually a perfect soloist because he has the perfect mix of listening to the orchestra and being, I wouldn't say necessarily a chamber player because that would be a step too far, and that kind of the repertoire, and the soloistic concertante repertoire. But he has the perfect mix of listening to everybody, joining the orchestra, making everybody around him better, and also leading. So his ideas are very, very clear. Like, he knows what he wants. He knows what he's going to do. Of course, there's little variations here and there, but the overall, the arc of the message of the piece is very clear from the get-go. So what we want as an orchestra, what I want as a conductor, is somebody who comes in with a real musical contribution, not just somebody with tons of chops, technique. I mean, talking shop here, but somebody who actually will lead the musical message. So together, then it's easy for us to convey it to the orchestra. And it's easy because, concerto, yeah, it's great. If your solo part is great, but if it doesn't really match the orchestra part, it's not that, when you're listening to it, you feel there's something off a little bit.
Yeah.
You can never put your finger on it. You just say, there's something off about this, And you say, well, it's not the orchestra, it's not the soloist, maybe it's the conductor, I don't know. It seems okay. And it's just I use that word often, but it's true. It's the communion between all of this together. But for that, it needs to be, there's certain hierarchy, is that the soloist needs to be absolutely sure of where he's going with this. The conductor needs to be very open and humble and understanding where the soloist is going to go with this and go with them, because it's clear that it's not a reaction we have to do. A reaction is not good. It's a common action. So if we do a reaction, we're always a little late, and that's why it sounds off sometimes. But if it's a common action with the leadership of the soloist, then it's very easy. And with Augustin, it's immensely easy. Even in the Sibelius, which is one of the hardest orchestra parts of violin concerti.
Yeah. Yeah, not all concerti are created equally when it comes to the orchestral part, I'm sure.
Or sometimes we like to say they're all equal, but this one is a little bit more equal than others.
Let's pivot now and talk a little bit about pianist Olga Kern, because she's also on this concert with, this powerhouse Concerto No. 3 of Rachmaninoff. I was sitting in the audience for this performance, and it was just so stunning and so exciting. How would you compare and contrast the two? And why don't you start, Zach, talk a little bit about that concert?
It was an amazing performance from this past January, and I remember when we were putting together this season, I had asked Alain, I said, whom would you really want to do the Rock 3 with? If you were to think of, let's just say money was no object, sort of imaginings. And Olga's name was the first name to come out of his mouth. And I'll say from my perspective, it was really great to watch Alain Trudel get so excited, like a school kid, to come and play the Rachmaninoff, because I just could tell that even when you're a spectacular musician and a conductor, as Alain is, there's still people that you just can't wait to collaborate with. So that was special for me to watch, and I hope you don't mind me saying that. But when Olga came, she's bringing this wonderful Russian piano tradition. And, she is somebody who plays at the top of her game everywhere she goes and has played with all of the great orchestras. But the Rock 3 is really one of these sensational pieces. And if we go back to that virtuoso discussion we had, it's very easy in the Rock 3 for the pianist to become misaligned with the orchestra. Mm. And in some ways, it's harder to pull off that idea that it looks so easy because it's so hard for everybody. I've seen many wonderful performances by big orchestras, major metropolitan orchestras, in fact, where the pianist and the orchestra don't come together at critical points in the first movement, lyrical parts of the second movement, or in the great finale of the third movement. And if that happens, you do notice, exactly as Alain said, you definitely notice that that something is being created in front of you. It doesn't sound easy anymore because you suddenly snap back to reality that everything is very difficult. And this was a performance when Olga came to town that she just knocked it out of the park.
Yeah.
The sound that she made from that piano, it was like she had more hands, more muscle, more tone. I mean, it sounded like a different piano.
Yeah. One of the things that I find so thrilling about this particular concerto is that even when everything comes together and everything is in the right place, it sort of sounds like it could go off the rails at any minute. There's a sense of
some danger to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Danger is a good word. And a soloist who can sort of portray that danger but still keep it under their fingers, so to speak, really makes that concerto come alive. Every time I hear it, I'm astonished by it as if I've heard it for the very first time. And I think Olga Kern was very good at creating that sense of excitement. Elaine, you want to talk a little bit about your working with her, because, you mentioned earlier that she's behind you where you're standing on the stage. Yeah. I imagine communication is always an issue.
Well, personally, I find that all the instruments to accompany piano is the most challenging because of that. The conductor has the worst seat in the house because on each side of the piano, the violin, they hear her pretty well. But the thing is that you're not really listening to the notes or to the playing. It's weird to say. You're kind of managing energy. You're managing the aura of the pianist. You're managing the ebb and flow of the performance. More than actual hearing every note. It's kind of the wave of the sound that has to connect between the two, especially in Rachmaninoff because it changes all the time. Yeah. If the wave doesn't move, if it's just nice and tight, together, then you've missed the mark completely. So as you said very, very justly, is that it needs to feel like it's just on the verge, and that's and that's if it doesn't sound like, oh my God, they're really going at the edge of the world with this, then it's not right. So she does that very well. But she's very different than Augustin in the virtuoso sense. Is that, and I say this in the nicest way because I'm the hugest Olga Kern fan. She's a beast. She's just a beast. I mean, she comes in the night before. I think she was replacing somebody playing Grieg concerto with the Philharmonia on tour in some city like a few hours away by plane. I can't remember which one it was. And then just a few days before that, she was playing Rock 2. And then she came in a little early because she wanted to dust off and remember Rock 3. Now you just don't dust off Rachmaninoff third concerto. Yeah. But and also she had, she's one of the most famous winner of the Van Cliburn competition.
Yeah.
And that means that your career is, yes, you have to play very easy, virtuosic nice, but you also have to manage these huge expectations that you that are put on you at a very early age. And every time you go somewhere, they go, oh, it's the winner of the, and it's a little bit like, I remember once I was playing in Japan. I mean, I'm nowhere close to her kind of playing, but just to illustrate the feeling is I remember two instances, and I can give you that the people listening will totally understand what I'm talking about. Remember once I was in Japan, I was playing just before recital, and I had somebody come up to me before the show and said, I'm so happy to hear this. It's going to be perfect. Have a nice concert. I'm like, oh my God. And then I remember once in Brazil, I was doing a recital, and somebody comes backstage and says, I have all your recordings. I never heard you live. I can't wait to hear you live like your recording.
No pressure.
Like we live in an era like that, is that people, get to redo stuff on recordings, all that. That's kind of just a little parenthesis here. It's kind of what I like on those online things because you can't redo anything. They're just one takes that we're putting on, like during the coronavirus thing. It's kind of fun because you see people playing the way they play. There's little things here and there that make them human and makes it beautiful. Anyway, so somebody like Olga not only plays with this great ease and great confidence. Imagine the confidence to play Rock 3 when you haven't played it for a while. But the confidence comes from having practiced so much. And let's not fool ourselves. When you talk about, 10,000 hours to be a master at something, those people, those virtuosos, are way past those hours and at an early age. And it's about dedication. And it's, again, if I may come back to that Michael Jordan documentary, come in hours before practice, play hard at practice, stay hours after practice. Usually there's one person who does that in the music school, or two or three, but that's it. At the end of the day, those we say, oh, you're such a virtuoso. Oh, lucky you. Yeah, I'm lucky, but I also spent all my life practicing for this. Yeah. So those people, there's a reason why they're so confident. They have so much repertoire. They're so you can rely on them. and the message is very clear to them because they spend so much time articulating it.
So if we look back at the performance history of the Rachmaninoff Third Piano Concerto, we have some real titans of the keyboard who have brought this to the peristyle. We had wonderful Byron Janis twice in 1965 and in 1977. He was a big fan of the Toledo Symphony, and our music director at that point, Serge Fournier. Vladimir Ashkenazy performed the Rock 3 with us in 1971.
Wow.
Horatio Gutierrez, one of my favorite pianists, brought it to the peristyle in 1975. I remember being at a concert with Janina Fielkowska and Andrew Massey in 1993. And I love watching her play. So it was really great. That was a really formative concert for me. Yeah. John Nakamatsu performed it twice. In 2001 when he sat in at the last minute for another pianist, but then he also performed it right after he won the Van Cliburn. And then the wonderful Kirill Gerstein in 2008. So you think about the wonderful pianists, the wonderful people who've gone on to record this concerto, the many interpretations, steely, romantic, calculating all the different ways that the Rock 3 can be successful. Like we've had so many wonderful pianists bring it.
Yeah, that's quite an incredible roster that you mentioned there of pianists and ranging through several, a few different generations as well. Just a wonderful legacy.
Truly. And now Olga Kern.
Well, we get the opportunity to enjoy the fruits of their labors in this concert, which features, as we mentioned, Olga Kern, who we've been talking about, at the piano for Rachmaninoff Concerto No. 3. Also, Augustin Hadelich, the wonderful violinist, performing the Sibelius Violin Concerto. Alain Trudel conducting with the Toledo Symphony. That is WGTE Presents, TSO and HD, our ongoing television series airing Sundays at 6 o'clock on WGTE TV. Gentlemen, I'm going to have to turn it over to our next two panelists who are going to join us, Merwin Siu and also Felicia Canny. But I want to thank you both for checking in. We've got a few more of these that we're going to do, talking about different concerts, different concepts in the ongoing discussion that we've had over the past few weeks. So thanks to both of you. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll talk again.
Thank you so much.
Okay, well, it is Toledo Symphony Lab, and it's time to bring in two other guests, our regular panelists. That is Principal Second Violin and Artistic Administrator Merwin Siu from the Symphony. Also, the TSO's Marketing Director, Felicia Canny. Welcome to both of you.
We're the B team.
There is no A or B. We're all just as important as the other. So we've been doing these under quarantine episodes for a while now. We're into, I think, maybe our 10th episode since the stay-at-home order went into effect. And now we're going to talk about virtuosi, and this is kind of a big encompassing topic because it's a little gray for some folks. You know, people have their druthers when it comes to virtuosos of a particular instrument. So maybe we'll start just by talking a little bit about what you think of in terms of somebody who qualifies as a virtuoso. Who wants to talk first?
Well, I think that for me, the term virtuoso, when it applies to a musical piece, is very specific. I think of something that has a very flashy technique and that generates excitement. But when I'm thinking about it as it applies to a particular player, for some reason that connotation goes away for me, and I think of it just simply as somebody who's a master of the instrument or the voice or something that's a little bit more kind of all-encompassing. So a virtuoso player is, for me, just merely an amazing player, but a virtuoso piece is something that's flashy and brilliant.
Ah. What do you think, Felicia? Does it go beyond that, or did Merwin sort of sum it up for you?
he did a great job summing it up, and I'd have to agree. I think that a lot of times when people think of virtuoso, the first thought that comes to mind is someone who, yes, plays really flashy, they're fast, they're loud, and it's usually a violinist or a pianist.
Yeah.
And, the first musicians who come to mind are, Rachmaninoff, Ashkenazi, and others. And to me, that is definitely a part of it. But what makes someone a virtuoso is thorough command of the instrument, so much so that it's kind of an extension of the body. And it's something that I think people strive to become when they're learning an instrument or learning how to sing. But very few people kind of reach those heights.
Yeah. Well, virtuoso going beyond being just fast and loud, right?
Yes.
They can be soft and slow and still be exhibiting virtuoso qualities.
Yes.
Well, we are talking about virtuosos, or virtuosi, to use the Italian plural term, because the TSO and HD concert this weekend on WGTE features two prominent virtuosos of their instrument, that is the violinist Augustin Hadelich and also the pianist Olga Kern. Do you want to talk a little bit about those two artists? Merwin, maybe you can start with Augustin Hadelich because he's a violinist, you're a violinist. Obviously, there's some connection there.
Absolutely. And I think the only connection might be that we play nominally the same instrument because, wow, he's just on an amazingly different sphere. But, wow. I think one of the things that people talk about when they talk about Augustin is they mention that he has this, it seems like an extension of the golden period of violin playing. I think there's something about his sound that's very individually recognizable. And there was this wonderful thing that he helped to put together. I think Julia Fischer was the person who conceived of this idea of having multiple violinists. I think it ended up being 14 or 15 different violinists playing the different variations of the Bach chaconne. And Augustin was the person who compiled all of them and put them together one after the other. And I remember just being blown away by the idea of it, but then going back and deciding, okay, I'm going to listen to this blind. And then every time Augustine came on, every time I could immediately sense, oh, wait, that's him. His sound was totally different than everybody else's. And I think that's that kind of individuality of sound. It's very burnished and warm. I love his sound, and I love the way he makes everything seem effortless on the instrument.
Yeah, so people make, a big deal out of a particular violin that is being played, like a Stradivarius or a Guarnieri or what have you. How much of the sound that you're talking about, this kind of burnished sound, has to do specifically with the instrument itself, and how much has to do with what the violinist brings to it?
Well, I do think that certain instruments have certain sonic profiles that lend themselves better to one type of player or another. And the Stradivarius is generally a little rounder, a kind of cushier attack. And a Guarnerius, for instance, those violins tend to you can really hit those. You can attack them with a lot of power, and so there's maybe a little bit more consonance, I guess. Maybe Stradivari are kind of rounder vowels, Guarneri more powerful consonants. But that being said, I think there's still something that's very specific to the way a player uses the bow, the way he strikes, the way he or she strikes the instrument with their fingers, that it's still distinctive even if you switched instruments, changed instruments.
Yeah. Well, I imagine that the best of both worlds is to get the violinist matched perfectly with the instrument that reflects their talents. Now, of course, pianists can't take their particular piano with them everywhere that they go. Somebody like Olga Kern, who came in and played the Rock 3, was using the piano in the Paris style. Felicia, what were your impressions of that particular concert? You were there, right?
Yes, I actually attended both nights, which, I often do, but this one in particular was a challenge to get back on Saturday, but I made it. And I mean, Olga Kern is, I was first introduced to Olga Kern live in performance via the Toledo Symphony, so that holds a special memory in my heart. And I think what makes her one of the generation's greatest pianists is, of course, her talent and her skill. And she was the first woman to win the Van Cliburn, I think more than 30 years ago or something like that. And she has her own international piano competition and has traveled the world. But what makes her uniquely special is, again, her command of the instrument. And I think I remember hearing that she has larger hands and able to extend a little bit further, which is appropriate when playing Rachmaninoff. And she was just so facile with it and so emotive when playing on the piano both nights, and it just made it really, really special. So I am personally very excited to see the performance again on broadcast.
Yeah, that'll be this Sunday at 6 o'clock on WGTE TV. Well, anyway, guys, thanks for checking in and talking a little bit about virtuosos. It was a fun conversation, certainly something that speaks to the concert that we're going to hear on Sunday afternoon. That's at 6 o'clock on WGTE TV. So thanks to Merwin Sue and thanks to Felicia Canny for joining us by phone here on Toledo Symphony Lab.
Thanks so much, Brad.
Thanks.
This program is a production of WGTE Public Media in collaboration with our sponsor, the Toledo Symphony, with generous support from the Rita Barber Kern Foundation. You can download episodes of our program as a podcast at our website, wgte.org/lab. You can also subscribe to us through your podcast app of choice, including Apple and Google Podcasts. There are several different ways that you can stay connected to the symphony and keep that music alive during the health crisis through the TSO's social media outlets, including on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and of course YouTube. And if you are local, you can also watch concerts from the past 2 seasons as handpicked by music director Elaine Trudell. That is our television series WGTE Presents TSO in HD. It's broadcast every Sunday at 6 p.m. on WGTE TV 30. You can also hear recent programs of the TSO on Thursday evenings at 8 o'clock p.m. on FM 91 as part of our program WGTE in Concert. I'm Brad Cresswell. You've been listening to Toledo Symphony Lab from FM 91.